Please welcome Priya and Ghafar to VizConnect. We are thrilled they will discuss their collaboration for their incredible The Matrix franchise visualization. Please begin.
Perfect. Thank you. And welcome everyone. And thank you so much, Sagar and Adam, for having us here on VizConnect. We are super excited to talk about our recent Viz collaboration, which was all about the Matrix movies. So here is a little bit about us. My name is Priya Padham, and I am a trainee consulting analyst at the Data School, which is part of the Information Lab. And last year, I became a Tableau Public Ambassador and a Tableau Public Featured Author, which I am so grateful for. And I also received the Notable Newbie Busy Award, which means the absolute world to me. And I'm so happy to be part of such an amazing community. We also wanted to share a quick random fact about ourselves. So, Radiohead is my all-time favorite band, and last year I made a viz all about their songs using data from the Spotify API, which can actually be found on my Tableau public profile. So I'll pass this on to Ghafar.
Hi everyone, I'm Ghafar Shah. I'm a senior analyst at Comcast. I was a Tableau Public Featured Author last year in 2020, and I am also incredibly grateful for receiving the Biggest Growth Vizzy Award at the 2020 Tableau Conference. So massive thank you to the Tableau community for all their support these last 2 years. Fun facts about me, I'm a massive fan of Marvel and anime, and my favorite TV shows to currently binge watch is Amazon Prime, The Boys, and Invincible. And you can actually find my The Boys viz on my Tableau Public portfolio. So now we'd like to welcome all of you to the Matrix for this presentation. When Priya and I decided to work on our first collaborative viz together, there were just so many ideas we had in mind, right? From sports, finance, crime, weather, health, food, travel, and honestly, the list of ideas just goes on. And it was really challenging for us as a team to settle on one topic we both agreed on. Some of the data sets for these topic ideas were actually really hard to find online, while other data sets didn't seem that interesting. Eventually, we realized that we both love watching a lot of TV shows and movies, and that's how we decided on something TV related for our first collaborative viz. However, we still weren't sure what we wanted to create. So on the following slides, Priya will talk more about how we decided on the Matrix franchise dashboard.
Exactly. So, just like Afar mentioned, we really wanted to narrow our focus down into movies and TV shows. And during our initial idea phase, we were originally going to do a viz about Family Guy. But then, just from chatting with one another and discussing back and forth, we found that we both love sci fi and action. So, with that in mind, we decided to base our viz on The Matrix. So we're both actually huge fans of the movies, and we've chatted about the movies on several occasions prior to even wanting to collab. And as we actually just started to discuss this potential viz more, the ideas just flowed, and we had a good idea of what we wanted to create. So it just seemed like the perfect fit for our first viz together as well. And we were also super excited about the release of Matrix 4, and we can't wait to watch that whenever it comes out too.
Awesome. So once we agreed on creating the Matrix franchise visualization, we organized a matrix table in Google Docs and jotted down the type of data that we wanted to collect for all three Matrix films. Two data sets that we absolutely needed to show were the box office earnings and Rotten Tomato scores. And it was really interesting to see which Matrix film made more money and also seeing which film had higher positive critic reviews.
Exactly. And we also thought it would be interesting to find survey data to see what people thought of the Matrix, as well as look into Google Analytics data and to see if we could spot any trends in terms of the search result popularity of the Matrix itself, too.
So for the box office earnings, we went online and collected all the data from boxofficemojo.com. And once we had everything in Excel, something we needed to figure out was a way to analyze this type of data because we were given options to show daily, weekly, and weekend box office earnings. At the time, I thought it'd make sense to create three different charts. But Priya had an awesome idea where she introduced me to Ryan Sleeper's blog on sheet swapping parameters. And by using sheet swapping parameters, I was able to create a chart that lets users navigate between the categories with only three buttons. So the buttons were designed by Priya in Figma. And once Priya sent those images over to me, I was able to put this chart together. It definitely saved us a lot of real estate on the dashboard, and it was a great way to keep it simple for the user.
Perfect. So in this section of the Viz, I wanted to compare the critic versus audience scores across all three of the Matrix movies. And I actually remember seeing on Kevin Flerlage's Adam Sandler Viz that he used a barbell or a dumbbell chart to illustrate the differences in both of those ratings. But when I actually tried this for these movies, some of the scores were just so similar, so the circles overlap, so it didn't look quite as good as we had hoped. So I decided to just keep it very simple with just some percentages for each of the films. And I also color coded the critic and audience scores respectively to make it much easier to differentiate between the two scores too. And we could actually see by the third film, the scores had dramatically decreased. So this just allowed us to highlight how the first Matrix film was definitely the most well-received of the franchise.
Cool. And something we really were interested in seeing was a Google search trend of Matrix 4. Our time frame for the Google trend chart spanned back to January 1st of 2020 because we wanted to capture a whole year to see if there were any spikes. And we actually saw a huge spike in late November 2020, which is right around the time when we started seeing articles and blogs being released by Warner Brothers, uh, announcing their decision to release all of their 2021 films, including Matrix 4, in theaters and HBO Max. We actually just found out that Matrix 4 is set to release on December 22nd, 2021, which is really exciting.
Definitely. So in terms of this section of the Viz, I have a kind of love-hate relationship with pie charts and donut charts, but I really love when a donut chart is extremely thin and only has two sections on it, so that part of it is dark and almost fades into the background, and then the rest is highlighted in one color. And I really think it looks quite modern, and I love seeing them on other Vizes too. So we decided to go for a donut chart here and really emphasize the popularity of the first Matrix movie by highlighting that portion in green. And for this, I actually used Twan's or Tableau Magic's tutorial in order to get that gray section thinner than the highlighted part. And I think that really added to the look and the feel of the chart itself too. And it also really showed how certain audiences favor the movie more according to those survey results.
And we always find survey results to be interesting. And we came across a YouGov survey online analyzing answers to a question about whether or not the Matrix 4 film was a good idea or a bad idea. The responses to the survey question was broken out by age and gender. And I was honestly so happy to see that a lot of the respondents to this survey believed making a Matrix 4 film was a good idea. So it was really cool to see these results, and we thought it was a great addition to our Matrix dashboard.
So here we decided to look into age and which generation the first movie was most popular with, and also to see whether there was an age group in particular that actually prefers it. And again, I wanted to keep the design of this chart very simple, so I just went for a stacked bar chart. And I really love how stacked bars can sometimes look as if it's filling up to 100%, kind of like a progress bar, and the effect that that has as well. So that's what I tried to do here as I highlighted the popularity percentage for each generation in green and then made the rest of the bar a dark gray so it fades into the background. And here we can actually see that based on the survey results, the movie was most popular with Generation X, followed closely behind by millennials and baby boomers. So now we'll actually share some of the challenges that we both encountered when creating the Viz. So first of all, it's choosing the Viz layout. So when we were first deciding on the design, we really wanted to try a wide form Viz, especially as we had both never done that before. And we saw some really amazing examples of wide form Vizes within the community. But when I actually tried this out myself, I found it quite difficult to get the layout right and decide where things will actually fit. And I found it even more difficult to set out how much space would be for each of the sections compared to just doing it in a long form viz, which I'm much more used to. So that's why in the end, I decided to just revert back to our trusty long form viz style and do that instead. And once we actually made that decision, everything just seemed to fall into place and fit together much more easily and better overall. So next, another challenge we came across was selecting chart types. So an example of this, like I mentioned before, was barbell charts to compare the audience versus critic scores for the movies. But then we decided that didn't work as well as we wanted it to, and we decided to just simply use some big numbers instead. But when it came to other chart types, for example, when showing the Matrix 4 survey data, we decided to keep that very simple with just a collection of bar charts. And that made it much easier to interpret the data straight away. And it also meant that all the charts we used were very simple to interpret and to actually read as well.
Awesome. And scavenging for data sets related to the Matrix was really challenging. The easy part was gathering the box office earnings and Rotten Tomato scores. That was data we absolutely needed to show on our dashboard. But at the time, we didn't think adding survey data was a potential option for our collaborative viz. We honestly didn't know there was survey data out there related to the Matrix. So it did take some time and exploration to find all of our data, and I'm really glad that we did. And also remembering our time zone differences. So Priya's 5 hours ahead of me in London. So around my lunch hour at work is when Priya wraps up her workday in the UK. Because we both work from 9 to 5 in different time zones, it was really challenging, but it eventually worked out for us. So I'm going to go ahead and show everyone a quick demo of our dashboard. So if you haven't seen The Matrix, it's about a future where these smart machines have distracted humans by trapping them inside a simulated reality. And the reason behind all of this is that these machines are using people as an energy source while everyone is asleep. And then we have our hero in the movie, Neo, played by our favorite actor, Keanu Reeves. At the very top, the first chart that we show is our survey data. And according to the YouGov survey results, Gen X has a higher positive opinion about the Matrix compared to the other two generational categories, millennials and baby boomers. And showing this chart at the very top provided a really nice high-level view into what the audience thought about the first Matrix movie according to the YouGov survey. Now, then we show our really awesome donut chart that Priya built out where we look at the positive opinions by gender. This is also data that we collected from the YouGov survey results. We then get into showing the critic and audience score. And I really love how the first Matrix movie was rated highly among critics and the audience. But I was really upset when I saw Matrix Revolutions had lower ratings compared to the other two movies. I know Matrix Reloaded and Matrix Revolutions were both filmed back to back, but I felt like Matrix Revolutions was a lot more action-packed. What are your thoughts on these ratings, Priya?
Yeah, I definitely think Revolutions was better than Reloaded, but the first Matrix is my favorite.
And then we get into our box office analysis. We use sheet swapping parameters to navigate between domestic, daily, weekend, and weekly earnings. We can also choose any of the three Matrix movies from the drop-down filter, and then select a box office category to see the box office earnings over time. One thing you might notice, we gave this chart a very minimalistic look. So if anyone wanted to see the details of the movie's box office earnings, for example, here we have the Matrix selected, and we have also domestic weekly. Then we can hover over the area chart to see the details in the tooltip. If we scroll down just a little bit, we also see there's also another visual of YouGov survey results where people were asked if they believe making a fourth Matrix movie is a good idea or a bad idea. The data was broken out by demographics, so we showed both age and gender results according to the YouGov survey. I was really happy to see that so many folks who responded to the survey question thought it was a good idea to make Matrix 4. And then finally, we wrap up the presentation with our Google Analytics chart. And Priya and I thought it would be awesome to explore the Matrix 4 search popularity trend in Google from January 1st to January 31st. We noticed a huge spike in late November, which is right around the time when we started seeing news about Warner Brothers, announcing their decision to release the 2021 films in theaters and HBO Max. So that was really cool to see. And at the very end, there's an awesome quote by the character Morpheus that we included from one of my favorite scenes in The Matrix. So that wraps up my quick demo of our Matrix Viz, and I'll go ahead and hand it off to Priya, who will talk more about about how the back end of this dashboard was designed in Figma. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen and hand it off to you, Priya.
Perfect. Thank you, Ghafar. I'll just share my screen. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see my screen now.
Yep, we can see it.
Great. So I thought I would talk more about the design of the Viz and how I created it within Figma. So we'll start off with the very top of the dashboard here, where we can see the digital rain image, which is very quintessentially matrix. And for this, I just found a free image online. So it was just a background for your desktop wallpaper, and I fit that to the top of the dashboard itself. But if I just show you something, let me just move this up a bit. And you can see that the actual background of that image is very dark and it doesn't quite blend in with the background color of our dashboard. And you can see there's a very harsh line here and it just doesn't look very good. So in order to combat this and to blend it in better, I used a rectangle shape within Figma and I actually added a gradient background to it and I just used that fill option and I just created the gradient background just like that. And when I just overlaid that on top of that image, it actually fits very nicely on top like that. And you can see everything is blended in and you can't see that harsh line anymore, which is exactly what we wanted. So now if I just move down the dashboard a little bit, we have the main title. So I really wanted to find a font online that matched the very unique font of the Matrix title. And I actually did find one, which I was very happy about. And if I just select it here, we can see that the font is called Milltown 2. So if anyone is interested, feel free to search that online. And it's definitely a free font that you can download and try it out for yourself. So once I got that font and I was very excited, I wanted to add that green haze around the text itself. So I'm going to show you now how I actually achieved this effect. So if I just scroll down on this right-hand side panel, we can see that I added a drop shadow effect to the text itself. So if I just click on this little sun icon, I'll quickly just go over the settings that I used to create that effect. So we can see here I have the X value as 0 and I set the Y value as 5. So that's to make it slightly offset so you could clearly see that glow better. And I also set the blur to 40 because I wanted to soften it and I didn't want it to be too harsh. But I decided to choose a very bright, vivid green color for the actual glow color to make it an intense green. And I set the opacity to 100% too, again, to make it striking as well. So if I just cancel that, if I just move down to this franchise text directly underneath the title. So for this, I actually made the spacing in between the letters to be quite wide. And the reason I did that is to make it actually fit the width of the title so that it's all very level and aligned. And you'll see later on that the entire viz is all centered. And I wanted to make sure that it was all aligned evenly on both sides as well. And also something to mention is the font that I used for this text is called Fira Code, and that's actually the font that I used throughout the viz, and I'll talk more about that a bit later too. So if I just go down a bit again, we have the introduction, like Ghafar said in his demo, and this just introduces the matrix itself, and again, I have that in Fira Code. But then if I just go down a bit lower, each of the sections of the viz are broken down into boxes, and each of these boxes has a kind of green glow and shadow effect on them. So I really wanted to kind of demonstrate how I achieved that look. So if I just click on it, you'll notice that the boxes have a rounded edge or corner to them. So that was a very easy thing to do. I just set the corner radius to 40. And by doing that, it created that soft rounded edge, which I really like. And in terms of the actual effect of the glow, if I just scroll down on this side panel, you can see that I applied 2 drop shadow effects to this box. So if you look at the first drop shadow, if I just click on this sun, I set the X and Y values to -5, and that's just to offset that to the left-hand side so that the kind of green glow will be on that side instead. and I set the blur to 50 because I didn't want it to be too intense. I wanted it to be quite subtle. And I even decided to choose a darker green color as well, again, to make it more subtle. And I set the opacity to 41% because I wanted it to kind of blend in more with the background. So next up, I chose the kind of darker shadow on the boxes. So we can see here I have an X and Y value of 30 because I wanted that dark shadow to appear on the right-hand side of the box. I also set the blur to 50 again to make it subtle. And this time I set the color to black because my background is actually a off black color. It's not quite black. So the shadow had to be a dark black color to show up. And again, I set the opacity to a lower 35% to make it kind of less intense too. So once I achieved the look that I wanted, and it almost looks like the box is 3D and jumping out at you, which I really like, I just copied and pasted that across the entire Viz. So every section has that box, but I just adjusted the size of the boxes to fit whatever we put inside of them. So like I mentioned previously, if I just zoom in a little bit, we have the font for each of the boxes as Fira code. And I chose Fira code because it's very matrix code-like, and it reminds me of the kind of font you'd see in when you're coding. So that's why I decided to choose that. And also, in some of these sentences or descriptions in each section, I actually highlighted elements in that matrix green color, again, to make them stand out and also for emphasis. So I'm just going to zoom out again, like that. Perfect. So now just to quickly mention some features of Figma that I found very helpful when designing the Viz itself. So first of all, if I just go over here to the left-hand side and click on the frame, something I really like are grid lines. So you can see here we have an option to add a layout grid. So mine is currently hiding. So if I click on this eye icon, we now have the layout grid. And we can actually see it gives a nice grid for us to make sure everything is aligned properly. So that really helps. So I can count the squares to make sure everything is spaced as I want it to be. So I'm just going to turn these lines off now. And another thing I really like about Figma are the alignment lines. So if I just click on this box and I move it slightly, you should see these red lines appear, and it's very reminiscent of what you'd find in PowerPoint. And I really appreciate these lines because it tells you when everything is perfectly aligned. And like I mentioned previously, I really wanted everything to be aligned perfectly in the center, and the spacing or the blank space on either side of the Viz to be exactly the same as well. So once I created all of this background within Figma, the final step was to simply export it. So let me just click on frame 3. And if I just scroll down on the right-hand side, there's an option to export it. So I just exported it as a PNG image. So now I'm just going to jump into Tableau. And we'll see here that the entire background is simply that background image that I exported from Figma. And I just set the options as fit image. And I actually learned that from Judith Becker's recent video as well, to just fit the image instead. And that improves the quality. So I've done that to my Vizes now. So once that was done, I set the size of this image object to fit the entire dashboard. And you can see if I scroll down, we now had a nice little template where we could just overlay our existing charts that were built within Tableau and place them on top of each of these boxes like that. So that was just a very quick overview of how the design was created inside of Figma and then exported and placed in Tableau. So needless to say, working on a collab Viz is an awesome experience, and here are some reasons why. So as a team, we broke down complex tasks into smaller steps, and we also assigned different tasks for one another as well. So for example, Ghafar worked on data collection and did half of the charts, and I did the other half of the charts and the dashboard design. And by doing it that way, it definitely shared the workload and broke everything down into easier chunks for us to complete. So the next point is giving and receiving feedback, which we both know is extremely essential, especially for us. And we spent a lot of time sending things back and forth and asking for each other's opinions. For example, we would send screenshots of charts or design ideas, and I would send Ghafar a picture of how the dashboard looks so far, and he would let me know if I had to tweak anything or if something else would look a bit better. And just keeping each other in the loop that way and tweaking as we went along was so useful. And it was also very important for us to be open to feedback and also be open to sharing feedback as well, because we want the Viz to be the absolute best that it could be. So definitely keep that communication flowing. We also shared a lot of new ideas with each other throughout working on the project. And working with someone else means that two heads are better than one, and things that may have been missed are caught by the other person. So it's really great to have another pair of eyes to have a look at things and to share their thoughts as well.
Awesome. So following up on what Priya mentioned, our collaborative Viz experience was a really great opportunity to learn from one another. For example, I didn't know much about sheet swapping parameters, and Priya shared an awesome blog by Ryan Sleeper on that topic. It was a little challenging for me at first using sheet swapping parameters since it was so new to me. I think the one time I ever used it might have been for a Makeover Monday Viz last year in 2020, and I haven't looked at it again since that time. So it was great to learn something new again. That leads to my second point, where we picked up new design and technical skills. If you've seen our Tableau public portfolios, you'll notice Priya and I have similar design styles in that we both use long form layouts for a lot of our work. So it was really awesome to share our design perspectives on our matrix dashboard. Like Priya mentioned, two heads are better than one. And then for my last point, collaborative Viz was a great opportunity to build up our design and storytelling skills. From choosing the right charts, adding context to our visuals, and setting up our dashboard layout, these were all very important in building out our matrix dashboard.
Perfect. So now we'll be sharing some tips that we think will be helpful to make your Viz collaborations awesome too. So first of all, we definitely recommend working with a friend, and it makes it so much more fun because you're hanging out with your friend and creating something together that you're both passionate about, and it's about a topic that you both love too, which is amazing. And it also means that you both know each other well and you know each other's strengths, and you can talk openly about who will do what, and that will make things much easier in the long run too. So my next point is communication is key. So communicating regularly and keeping each other in the loop is so important, especially if things get in the way or schedules change. So being very open and honest and chatting with each other will ensure that that process runs as smoothly as possible and any setbacks can be resolved quickly. So in the end, like I said, it's all about teamwork and you're both in this together and you want the Viz to be amazing and best it can be. And that leads me on to my next point, and that is to schedule in regular check-ins. And that's especially important if you're working in different time zones, just like Ghafar and myself. And it will ensure that you're all kept up to date with any changes and the situation on all sides of things. And you can come together and adjust timelines and also brainstorm ideas. You can also pick a time and a day that will suit you to hop on a call and discuss the Viz.
Awesome. And having a goal in mind and setting deadlines is really, really important. No one else will tell you that you need to have the dashboard ready by a certain date. So it really all comes down to you and your collaborative Viz partner. For us, setting deadlines helped expedite the creation of our matrix dashboard so we can share it earlier with the Tableau community. Being open to giving and receiving feedback is also really important. There were countless times when Priya and I both offered feedback on each other's design elements and charts. A really good example is the sheet swapping parameters Priya suggested looking into for one of my charts, and also choosing between a wide form and a long form layout. And finally, for my last tip, always work off of the same version of Tableau and paste all the sheets into a main workbook. If you and your collaborative Viz partner are working on different versions of Tableau, then you might run into some technical issues, especially when you're working between hyper and extracts.
Perfect. So thank you all so much for joining us. We hope we provided some insight into our thought processes and how we created our Viz. please feel free to connect with us on Twitter and LinkedIn. I hope you all have a lovely day and take care.
Thanks for joining, everyone. Bye.